Verses 10 to 15. The interpretation made of the vision, v10. They gathered assuredly from this that the Lord had called them to preach the gospel there, and they were ready to go wherever God directed. Note, we may sometimes infer a call of God from a call of man. If a man of Macedonia says, "Come and help us," Paul thence gathers assuredly that God says, "Go and help them." Ministers may go on with great cheerfulness and courage in their work when they perceive Christ calling them, not only to preach the gospel, but to preach it at this time, in this place, to this people. Paul's voyage to Macedonia hereupon, he was not disobedient to the heavenly vision, but followed this divine direction much more cheerfully, and with more satisfaction, than he would have followed any contrivance or inclination of his own. Thitherward he turned his thoughts. Now that he knows the mind of God in the matter, he is determined, for this is all he wanted. Now he thinks no more of Asia, nor Bithynia, but immediately we endeavored to go into Macedonia. Paul only had the vision, but he communicated it to his companions, and they all, upon the credit of this, resolved for Macedonia. As Paul will follow Christ, so all his will follow him, or rather follow Christ with him. They are getting things in readiness for this expedition immediately, without delay. Note, God's calls must be complied with immediately. As our obedience must not be disputed, so it must not be deferred. Do it today, lest thy heart be hardened. Observe, they could not immediately go into Macedonia, but they immediately endeavored to go. If we cannot be so quick as we would be in our performances, yet we may be in our endeavors, and this shall be accepted. Thitherward he steered his course. They set sail by the first shipping and with the first fair wind from Troas, for they may be sure they have done what they had to do there when God calls them to another place. They came with a straight course, a prosperous voyage, to Samothracia. The next day they came to Neapolis, a city on the confines of Thrace and Macedonia, and at last they landed at Philippi, a city so called from Philip king of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great, it is said, v12, to be the chief city of that part of Macedonia, or, as some read it, the first city, the first they came to when they came from Troas. As an army that lands in a country of which they design to make themselves masters begin with the reduction of the first place they come to, so did Paul and his assistants. They began with the first city, because, if the gospel were received there, it would the more easily spread thence all the country over. It was a colony. The Romans not only had a garrison, but the inhabitants of the city were Romans, the magistrates at least, and the governing part. There were the greatest numbers and variety of people, and therefore the most likelihood of doing good. The cold entertainment which Paul and his companions met with at Philippi. One would have expected that having such a particular call from God thither they would have had a joyful welcome there, as Peter had with Cornelius when the angel sent him thither. Where was the man of Macedonia that begged Paul to come thither with all speed? Why did not he stir up his countrymen, some of them at least, to go and meet him? Why was not Paul introduced with solemnity, and the keys of the city put into his hand? Here is nothing like this. It is a good while before any notice at all is taken of him. We were in that city abiding certain days, probably at a public house and at their own charge, for they had no friend to invite them so much as to a meal's meat, till Lydia welcomed them. They had made all the haste they could thither, but, now that they are there, they are almost tempted to think they might as well have stayed where they were. But so it was ordered for their trial whether they could bear the pain of silence and lying by, when this was their lot. Those eminent and useful men are not fit to live in this world that know not how to be slighted and overlooked. Let not ministers think it strange if they be first strongly invited to a place, and then looked shyly upon when they come. When they have an opportunity of preaching it is in an obscure place, and to a mean and small auditory, v13. There was no synagogue of the Jews there, for aught that appears, to be a door of entrance to them, and they never went to the idol temples of the Gentiles, to preach to the auditories there, but here, upon inquiry, they found out a little meeting of good women, that were proselytes of the gate, who would be thankful to them if they would give them a sermon. The place of this meeting is out of the city, there it was connived at, but would not be suffered anywhere within the walls. It was a place where prayer was wont to be made, prosush where an oratory or house of prayer was, sosum, a chapel, or smaller synagogue. But I rather take it, as we read it, where prayer was appointed or accustomed to be. Those that worshipped the true God, and would not worship idols, met there to pray together, and, according to the description of the most ancient and universal devotion, to call upon the name of the Lord. Each of them prayed apart every day. This was always the practice of those that worshipped God, but, besides this, they came together on the Sabbath day. Though they were but a few and discountenanced by the town, though their meeting was at some distance, though, for aught that appears, there were none but women, yet a solemn assembly the worshippers of God must have, if by any means it be possible, on the Sabbath day. When we cannot do as we would, we must do as we can. If we have not synagogues, we must be thankful for more private places, and resort to them, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, according as our opportunities are. This place is said to be by a riverside, which perhaps was chosen, as befriending contemplation. Idolaters are said to take their lot among the smooth stones of the stream, Isa 57:6. But these proselytes had in their eye, perhaps, the example of those prophets who had their visions, one by the river of Chebar, Is 1:1, another by the great river Hiddekel, Dan 10:4. Thither Paul and Silas and Luke went, and sat down, to instruct the congregation, that they might the better pray with them. They spoke unto the women who resorted thither, encouraged them in practicing according to the light they had, and led them on further to the knowledge of Christ. The conversion of Lydia, who probably was the first that was wrought upon there to believe in Christ, though not the last. In this story of the Acts, we have not only the conversion of places recorded, but of many particular persons, for such is the worth of souls that the reducing of one to God is a great matter. Nor have we only the conversions that were effected by miracle, as Paul's, but some that were brought about by the ordinary methods of grace. Who this convert was that there is such particular notice taken of. 4 things are recorded of her. Her name, Lydia. It is an honor to her to have her name recorded here in the book of God, so that wherever the scriptures are read there shall this be told concerning her. Note, the names of the saints are precious with God, and should be so with us. We cannot have our names recorded in the Bible, but, if God open our hearts, we shall find them written in the book of life, and this is better, Philosophy 4:3, and more to be rejoiced in. Her calling. She was a seller of purple, either of purple dye or of purple cloth or silk. She had a calling, an honest calling, which the historian takes notice of to her praise. She was none of those women that the apostle speaks of, 1 Tim 5:13, who learned to be idle, and not only idle, etc. It was a mean calling. She was a seller of purple, not a wearer of purple, few such are called. The notice here taken of this is an intimation to those who are employed in honest callings, if they be honest in the management of them, not to be ashamed of them. Though she had a calling to mind, yet she was a worshipper of God, and found time to improve advantages for her soul. The business of our particular callings may be made to consist very well with the business of religion, and therefore it will not excuse us from religious exercises alone, and in our families, or in solemn assemblies, to say, we have shops to look after, and a trade to mind, for have we not also a God to serve and a soul to look after? Religion does not call us from our business in the world, but directs us in it. Everything in its time and place.